The Mizzou Tigers, a team that a lot of people did not have at 7-1 at this point in the season. They have defied a lot of odds and a lot of predictions to be where they're at. They are traveling to Sanford Stadium to take on the undefeated Georgia Bulldogs in hope of pulling off a massive upset. Coach Drinkwitz, in his 4th year at 7 wins, has more wins than he's had at any other point in his career at Mizzou. So this is uncharted territory for, this era of the Mizzou Tigers. They obviously have Luther Burden III, a monster receiver with Brady Cook and a great running back. And they've really, taken that next step offensively. They are elite. They have proven that they can be with the top tier teams in the SEC, i.e. that LSU game was very telling for what's to come from the Missouri Tigers. With that being said, Drew, the Georgia Bulldogs are 15.5-point favorites, and they've showed no signs of slowing down after losing Brock Bowers. Carson Beck goes the very next game and throws for 300 yards. Beck has thrown for 300 yards in 4 of his last 5 games. After some criticism from the fans early in the season, Carson Beck has really taken that next step, Drew. But when I'm looking at this game, Missouri last week, Drew, was able to bully South Carolina up front and really run the ball. Against Georgia, you're not going to be able to do that.
Yeah, I'm here to tell you now, if Missouri thinks they're going to come into Athens and run the football, it's just not going to happen. Maybe they're able to break away a big run here and there for 20 and 30 yards, but if your game plan is to push around the Georgia front 7 and to really control the pace of the game through running the ball, it's just not going to happen, especially on the road. Brady Cook and Luther Burden are going to have to be the 2 main guys for Missouri on offense, especially if Missouri wants to pull this thing off. Because, when you look at a 15.5-point spread, the bookmakers are basically calling that almost a blowout. And with Georgia, the way they looked last week against Florida, I think, honestly, probably one of their best games of the season, either between that or Kentucky. Georgia is not looking to slow down, like you said. This is a team that's only getting better. On top of the fact that Georgia just came out and they're number 2 in the playoff rankings right now, so Kirby Smart's going to find some way to use that to motivate his players and basically make his players think that they're not any good and they're not a good team. So the motivation's going to be there. Of course, Georgia almost lost to Missouri last year. This isn't really a revenge game for them, but in a way, you can definitely look at that and you can tell that Georgia's probably not going to let that happen again. I don't think Georgia's going to be sleepwalking in this one. This game does pretty much have a pretty good indication for the SEC East race, too. Whoever wins this one controls their own destiny in the SEC East. So a big game all around. With Georgia, though, I think Georgia just needs to do what they've been doing best, and they need to keep the ball through the air. I think Georgia's going to have a little bit of success running the football, but I think Carson Beck and the receivers, as long as they do what they did against Florida last week, I think Georgia's going to have similar results on offense, scoring in the 40s. Missouri's secondary is okay, but I don't think they've really seen a legitimate offense other than the LSU Tigers, and Georgia's offense is honestly on another level itself.
Yeah, Drew, when you talk about, Luther Burden and Brady Cook in this matchup for this Georgia secondary, I know that is one of the, soft spots that you've been critiquing as a Georgia fan is this secondary. And, you said that they've stepped up a couple times throughout the season, but Luther Burden is a absolute monster. And what makes him so difficult to cover is he is an outside receiver that has been converted to a slot. So he lines up literally everywhere on this Missouri offense. So whenever you're talking about the guys that are going to be covering him in the slot for the Georgia Bulldogs, how do you feel about that matchup with the cover corners for Georgia and Luther Burden at receiver for Missouri?
When you have a guy like Luther Burden or a Marvin Harrison, there really isn't a matchup on the team that's going to favor you. These are just really good receivers, and they're going to do damage no matter where they are. The only thing you can really do as a defense is find ways to slow them down and live with the fact that they're going to make a couple plays on you, and you can't let that beat you mentally. Luther Burden's a great receiver. He's going to be playing Sundays and making a lot of money. And as good as this Georgia secondary is, like I said, I don't think there's a matchup that favors Georgia in any way in terms of Luther Burden. So Luther Burden's going to make plays. You got to find ways to slow it down. You can't let him get active in the red zone. You got to find ways to get some double teams on him. You can't let him beat you over the top. If he catches a 5-yard pass and gets, another 5 yards for 10 yards total, I think that's kind of what Georgia's going to have to live with. And it's going to be a lot of bend but don't break, I think. I think Missouri's going to be able to move the ball. Missouri doesn't have an elite offense, but they're an offense that's capable of scoring a lot of points. And I think Georgia's just going to have to find ways to slow this team down. And as long as they don't give up touchdowns in the red zone, I think Georgia's going to be just fine.
Yeah, no, as a Tennessee fan, I that's a great point. Scoring in the red zone against SEC teams, 7 points instead of 3 is crucial. And also, I think Missouri's O-line, there's a couple guys on that O-line that are great. They have the highest rated PFF tackle in college football. And So that's Brady Cook's been protected from that. But all in all, that Georgia front seven is better than Missouri's O line. So I think it's going to come down to, can Georgia get pressure just sending four guys, maybe sending five guys without having to, fully commit, so they can stay, responsible in the pass game and the run game. Because, a lot's been made about this Missouri passing attack, but they can run the ball effectively too. They are a balanced offense. But I think if the front seven can get pressure on Brady Cook, that's going to be able to stop a lot of the momentum that Missouri would have. But Drew, last question to you before we get into predictions. If Missouri can pull off the upset, which is what a lot of Tennessee fans are hoping for, what is going to play out if Missouri pulls off the upset? How is it going to happen?
Well, one of the main things I think Missouri is going to have to do, they have a lot of physical corners and safeties. They like to disrupt pass routes and timing. And then, of course, they're going to have to find ways to pressure Carson Beck in the midst of all that. I'm not saying you got to pressure him by necessarily sacking him. Georgia's offensive line is really, really good. They haven't allowed a whole lot of sacks this year. And I think Missouri can pressure them and just get them uncomfortable in the pocket. And I think that's going to be enough to really disrupt some of the passing game of Georgia, especially with the corners on the outside playing as physical as they do. But at the same time, when you play physical on the outside like that and you kind of miss, it's kind of a high risk, high reward thing. If these Missouri corners get beat, playing physical, there's usually going to be a lot of grass behind them. And that's going to leave opportunities for Georgia to take a lot of deep shots down the field, which I do trust Carson Beck to make these deep throws more times than not. I know there's been times where he's missed a couple of them, but I think he's in a comfortable position now where he's going to be able to take some shots and convert on some. And then also, like I just already mentioned before, Missouri's going to have to find ways to score touchdowns in the red zone. I do think Missouri is going to be able to move the football. I do think it's going to be one of those deals, though, early on where it's going to take them a little bit to settle down, because you have to think of, if you look at all the games Missouri has played this year, they have not played in an atmosphere like a Sanford Stadium where there's SEC division title hopes on the line. It's just a different atmosphere out there. It's going to be loud, and I think Mizzou will settle in. And this is really a big game for them. I mean, this is a game where they could legitimately have a chance to take control of their own destiny and win the East. And they're going to feel disrespected by being 15.5-point dogs. So you're going to get Missouri's best, and Georgia's going to have to be able to play four quarters. But Mizzou's also going to play four quarters as well. You're not going to beat Georgia by playing just one half of football. And you can bet if Missouri's up by 7-10 points at halftime, Kirby Smart's going to make the adjustments necessary. You better be ready to have some adjustments on your own if you're Missouri.
Yeah, all great points there, Drew. Getting into my prediction, I really did believe that Missouri, being 2 touchdown underdogs, you kind of got nothing to lose. Of course, you're in race for the SEC East, but you're big underdogs. You go in there with nothing to lose, and you play your hardest. And as long as Georgia doesn't come out the gates and just really put it on them from the first quarter and make Missouri play from behind, I thought that Missouri could have been in this game and it could be a game. With that being said, I still think thought Georgia was going to win. And then the college football playoff rankings came out, and for some reason they put Georgia at number 2. And if you know anything about Kirby Smart, you know that, like you said at the beginning of the video, he is going to use that as fuel. So I think Georgia's going to come out and absolutely mollywop Missouri. If I was Missouri, I would be pissed at the playoff committee for what they did, man. Just let the sleeping bear lie. I was, going to take Missouri as 15.5-point dogs. I could have seen, maybe 10 points or something, but now I'm thinking like 17, 18, 19 points from this Georgia team. So give me Georgia and the points.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've been very skeptical on Georgia and the spread this year. Obviously, Georgia hasn't been very good covering the spread this year. I'm taking Georgia all the way. I think Georgia's going to do everything they can to make sure the committee knows they made a mistake by moving them to number 2. Or at least that's what I'm hoping for as a Georgia fan. I'd be very surprised to see anything else. I just think Georgia's built better for these big-time matchups. They've been in a lot more of these big-time matchups than Missouri has. Missouri's not used to being in the spotlight. This is really the first time Missouri's been anywhere near the top 10 for a very long time. And, of course, you're going to play in a Sanford Stadium, and it's just a very tough place to play in, especially with everything on the line. And that's going to show in this game. And I think Georgia's going to take full advantage of it. I think Georgia wins this game by 3 touchdowns. And it could be one of those deals where maybe it's close at halftime, or maybe Missouri just gets off to some crazy start and gets up 7-0, 10-0. But I'm telling you now, Georgia's going to come back. This is a team that doesn't panic at all. And Kirby Smart's mentioned that in multiple press conferences. This team has no panic in them or no fear. So with that being said, Georgia's covering the spread.
Yeah, Drew, Georgia's been there and done that, going undefeated in the SEC, playing in these big games, these playoff games. And a lot of the guys that are starting now were getting playing time on those teams in years past. So, this team doesn't have any quit in them. They've shown multiple times that they can come out the gates at halftime and close the door on teams that they potentially left it open for in the first half. But also, one last thing, the over-under is 45.5. I like the over on that just because I think Carson Beck is continuously getting better. Them losing Brock Bowers does hurt, yes, but everybody's been talking about it. The ball has to be spread around more evenly, and I feel like Carson Beck had Bowers as a safety blanket for just enough games to where he could get comfortable enough to be able to play without him. And, Georgia has no shortage of skill players on the outside. It's just been an issue of them, having their opportunity to show out. And, watch out for one of the wideouts other than Ladd McConkey this game to have himself a game, So I like the over. Georgia's been throwing the ball more than they have, in the last like 5, 6, 7 years. So this is a Georgia team that can put points on the board, and I wouldn't be surprised if that over hit.
Yeah, I think Georgia hits the over too, and I think Georgia can score well in the 40s in this game, or at least the upper 30s at the minimum. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. As always, if you enjoyed this video, leave a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, and let us know down below in the comment section what you think is going to happen in this game and what are some keys for both teams, all that good stuff. But that's going to do it, guys. We'll see you in the next one.